Hello everybody and welcome to the channel. My name is PJP, and in this video I'm gonna be sharing my thoughts on the Far Cry 3 and 4 games, which I have recently actually finished the Far Cry 4. Literally today I finished it. So while my thoughts are fresh, I wanted to share my thoughts on the game as a whole and how it compares to Far Cry 3. Because to be honest, and maybe I'm gonna spoil the review a little, but Far Cry 3 is so much better. Keep in mind that this video is gonna have spoilers for both Far Cry 3 and 4. I'm gonna try to keep it as minor as I can. I'm probably gonna only share the characters and maybe certain events, but overall I'm not gonna spoil the story, but still, there are gonna be spoilers here, so if you don't want to be spoiled, click off this video. But before we get into the review, I'm first gonna explain my backstory and how I got into Far Cry games. If I remember correctly, it was 2016 and I was searching for some first-person shooter game to replace the game that I was constantly playing at the time, which was Counter-Strike. And looking on the internet, Far Cry 3 seemed cool. I loved the look of it, I loved how colorful it was, and what I loved most about it was the physics, and I don't know if it should be called a mechanic, but the physics of the bodies. Like when you shoot a body in the head, it was so cool seeing it fall realistically, kind of. Because as I said, up to that point I was mainly, or I should say almost exclusively, playing Counter-Strike, and as we know, the physics of that game not the best, especially considering I was playing some of the more older versions. So I was really excited to play the game, and honestly I enjoyed it fine on my first playthrough, though I gotta say that at one point, which I think is the exact same point at which I got stuck in my most recent playthrough, which is up on my channel. If you want to, you can check it out, but it's not of the highest quality, and I mean both visually, and it's just back then I wasn't really good editor and all that shit, so I had some technical difficulties, is one way to explain what I mean. So as I was saying, in my most recent playthrough of Far Cry 3 and when I first played it, I think I got stuck at the same point, and when I played it for the first time I actually kind of gave it up for like a week or two and then got back into it again, because Far Cry in general is kind of a grindy game. You do almost the same shit over and over again until you beat the game, and that's fine if you enjoy what you're doing, and I did enjoy what I was doing, but I just got stuck and got annoyed. I almost actually got stuck at one point, but it was at the end of Far Cry 4 and it didn't end up with the video because of technical difficulties and because I was kind of pissed by the ending of the game, which I'm gonna get into in a second. But yeah, getting into the Far Cry 3. Not gonna lie, I agree with most people. The main characters, or should I say the good guys of that game, are garbage. And I mean that as characters and kind of as people. I mean, I don't care of them as people, but as characters, they fucking suck. Like, Jason is super generic character from an action movie, essentially. Like your average young adult who somehow becomes a fucking crazy people killing badass. I mean, it makes sense in the story, at least in my opinion, but still, it's kind of cliched and generic. But ultimately, it does what it's supposed to do, so I can't really complain that much there, especially, and here you're gonna see how I'm gonna kind of be reviewing Far Cry 3 and Far Cry 4 simultaneously. So, Jason, with all his faults, is miles ahead of Ajay from Far Cry 4. Like, Jason might be a generic character, but at least he had a character. AJ is just a simple blank slate, and personally I don't really like that. Like in Far Cry 3, AJ had its own motivations and narrative and what he wanted to do. He wanted to get his friends back and get off the island, and then there was a possibility of him staying on the island. because of the influence of the Rakyat and the path of the warrior, and I actually kind of like that narrative of the game. But in Far Cry 4, you're going to a country in Middle Asia, close to Nepal, I guess. I mean, the country is kind of based on Nepal, so that is called Kiryat, and you're going there because your mother is actually initially from there, but had immigrated, and now you're going back to spread her ashes, but you get caught by the main villain of the game, and you have to run away, and then you meet the supposed good guys, who on the introduction are fine, and at least their basics are fine, but they don't do really anything with them, or at least anything complex and interesting. But the worst thing that pisses me off about Ajay is that he doesn't question anything. He doesn't question anything, he just goes with everything that's happening in the game. Like, even if you do a blank slate character, you can kind of make it make sense. Like, there are two fuckers who constantly ended up drugging me. And AJ sometimes will be kind of, I don't know how to say it, angry at them. Sometimes would be calm, but even when he's angry, he would still go with the stupid drugging, so it doesn't make any sense to me. And yeah, as we're talking about characters, Far Cry 3's characters, if we exclude the main guys, the main friends of Jason, are pretty good and pretty memorable, I would say. Like, from the villains, we have like, what, 5 or 6 villainous characters? We have Vaas, Buck, Hoyt, Citra, and kind of ish Dennis, but not so much. And they're all so memorable. Like, come on, tell me how many of you actually ended up playing the game because of fucking Vaas. That fucking character is so great. I love him. He's one of my favorite villains from a video game, for sure. He's so memorable. But the villain in Far Cry 4? I mean, I admit, now that I'm done with the game and that I actually saw some of the opinions and actually learned some things, apparently there's one cool thing that can happen in Far Cry 4, which I don't know if I want to spoil or not. I mean, this is a review, might as well spoil it because the game is already like, what, 5 years old. So, in the beginning of the game, when the main guy, villain, catches you, he leaves the room, but tells you to wait for him and he's gonna come back. You can actually sit there and wait for like 15 minutes, and he actually comes back and takes you to spread the ashes. And that's the end of the game. Otherwise, you have to, you can run away and keep doing the missions and everything and kill and liberate outposts and everything, and in the end you go to the exact same room and you can shoot him. And that's the fucking game. And that is actually my ending of the game. It feels so unsatisfying. Like, compared to Far Cry 3, which had multiple bosses, like, Buck wasn't really that much of a boss, especially compared to Vaas and Hoyt, which had their own islands, but you still got a boss battle against him, so that was kind of cool. Like, it made the character matter a lot, and he was also a memorable character who was an asshole to you. And yes, the villain of Far Cry 4 also had bad guys, but they are barely relevant. Like, I think he has 3 bad guys. We had Yuma, Deplore, Nora, or something. I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name right. I'm gonna be putting pictures on the screen for the people I'm talking about. And Nora, she's also the leader of an arena, which I think that's one of the great additions of this game, the arena in which you can fight. That was cool, even though I only ended up fighting in it only once. But she's not really a villain, at least didn't see her as such, especially considering she was kind of, how to say it, wanting to revenge on one of the other villainous guy who had their own fortresses, the Plur, which I had to go and kidnap him, and he got tortured, and that was the end of it. Like, they are so uneventful. Like, they're kind of treated just like another mission. And Yuma, who I think is he's the most interesting of the right hand men and women of Pagan. You kill her on the first time you meet her, literally. Going into the good characters, which are the good guys. Going into the good guy characters of both games, in Far Cry 3, I mean, it's a bit gray area, let's be real here, but Dennis is, for the most part, good guy to you. The Doctor, Einhard, is a good guy to you. There's the Agent Willis, who I think is pretty much only second to Vass in terms of how memorable and interesting character he is. And also, he was such a cool character that they actually brought him into Far Cry 4. But he was a bit of a douchebag in Far Cry 4, and he wasn't a good-ish guy with good intentions in Far Cry 3, but he's a total fucking douchebag in Far Cry 4. He literally uses you to do his missions and lies to you, and kicks you off a plane, which causes you to get captured. So he was a total douchebag. And one thing I wonder, is he literally just coming from Far Cry 3 into Far Cry 4? Because I think that might be the same plane, I don't know. But yeah, in Far Cry 3, he's so mysterious and interesting and intriguing, and he's actually helpful to you. And you end up helping him out too to leave the place. And it's so cool. We also have the guy called Sam, who I really liked, who is an American who was raised in Germany. And he's another really interesting character, and I love the mission with him, in which we have to destroy a bunch of, what was it, gas tanks or something. I don't know, it's such a memorable mission because, I don't know the name of that song that plays in the background, but it's a famous German song. Like, overall, Far Cry 3 is just so much more memorable and better because they kind of put more thought into the characters and into the story. Meanwhile, Far Cry 4 didn't give a shit about that at all. I mean, there are kind of the basics there, and the basic of the story, going to a war-torn country to spread your mother's ashes, is cool, but they didn't really justify why Ajay would give a shit about this place at all. I mean, anything would have been fine, but they didn't do absolutely anything. And then we have the two supposed good guys, which are Sabal and Amita. And at first, they're both fine. I can see both their viewpoints, and honestly, I said that they didn't end up being really great characters, but the basics are pretty interesting. And yeah, that's the case. One wants to return Kirat to how it used to be. One wants to evolve the country past what it has become. So I can kind of see both viewpoints, and I feel like it would be somewhere in the middle, which is weird because Pagan is kind of in the middle. So in that game it's weird because there's no really clear villain, but there's also no clear good guy, and it ultimately kind of makes me feel like the game doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. You just literally wasted your time just killing random people in the fucking game, NPCs. Meanwhile, Far Cry 3 gives you a fucking experience. It actually gives you a story. It's a pretty generic 90s or 80s action movie one, but it fucking leaves you with a memorable experience. Like, the story is fucking awesome and the characters are so fucking memorable. It's overall actually a pretty good game, and seeing how bad of an ending Far Cry 4 has, has kind of elevated how much I actually like Far Cry 3. Because, and I know I just played through Far Cry 4, and I can see some reasons why I would be interested in playing Far Cry 4, because there was like one or two things about Far Cry 4 that I actually really liked, but I'm gonna get into them in a second. But honestly, right now, I would be fucking happy to play Far Cry 3 again. Right now, I can literally just go and play it right now, and I would fucking love it again. You know, I don't really ever see myself replaying Far Cry 4. The only things that I would be replaying are the missions in which we go into the snow mountains, because that was a really cool change of scenery, and I find those missions the most interesting, and I don't know, there was just something about them that made them stand out. And I still remember one of the missions, which I think was the first time we got sent there, or the second one. It might have been the second one, and we had to keep pushing through and going further and further, and I really enjoyed that. It was really great. And the second thing from Far Cry 4 that I love is going for the tankas, which are some pieces of painting or something, which when you get them, they transport you kind of in a flashback to thousands of years ago, as a guy who, I don't know, it has a lot of demons and some other shit like that. Like, if you have played the game, you know what I'm talking about. But it's so fucking awesome to play. I enjoy the shit out of it. It's so cool, and especially because for the most part you only use a bow, first with one arrow and then it gets upgraded to 5. And I fucking love using the bow, and I didn't end up using it that much in Far Cry 3, but I decided that I wanted to use as many weapons as I can in Far Cry 4. So I chose 4 completely different weapons, which was one fast sharpshooting gun, one shotgun, one grenade launcher, and a bow. And pretty much all the game ended up being with those 4 weapons. But I love the bow the most. I would always use it first. And that kind of mission being done with a bow elevated it so much. And I still actually haven't finished the last tanka, but I don't know if I really want to. Maybe I'll post it on my channel, but I don't know, we'll see. And here is where I'm gonna say that Far Cry 4 kind of did one thing better than Far Cry 3, and that is kind of the gameplay. Like, if you're into the game for the gameplay, like, if you're in it for the gameplay, you're gonna enjoy the shit out of it. It's really entertaining, although it does get a bit repetitive, but that's just par for the course for these types of games. And there wasn't much improvements, but I wasn't bored. There were good additions. I like the helicopter thingy, I like the hook thing, but the fact that the story is so lacking is why I consider Far Cry 4 to be a bad game, because a game doesn't necessarily have to have a great story, because it's a game. If I wanted a great story, I'm gonna go watch a movie or a TV show. But it's an important thing, at least. Like, Far Cry 3 story is not original, it's not amazing or unique, but it's good enough and it entertains you, and you're into it, and it helps with the immersion. Far Cry 4, it half-asses its way up to it. Like, they probably didn't care. Like, it feels like they didn't plan to have a story at all, but they were kind of forced to do it, so they just made it up and didn't bother fleshing it out and properly. But yeah, going into the ratings for those games, at first I was considering to rate Far Cry 3 a 7 out of 10 because it's not unique, as I said, but now that I've seen Far Cry 4, that shit gets raised up to 9 out of 10 for fucking sure. Meanwhile, Far Cry 4 is going to be a 6 out of 10 for sure. So my final verdict for these games is, if you want immersive experience so my final verdict for these games is, if you want to try a Far Cry game, go for Far Cry 3. it's by far the best game. If you want more, and so my final verdict for this is, if you want to try a Far Cry game, try Far Cry 3. Because it's by far the best. It's not the best at the gameplay or the story, and I admit I haven't played Far Cry 5, but now I don't really plan to at all, because it doesn't seem that different from Far Cry 3 or 4. But if you want to try a Far Cry game, go for Far Cry 3, because while it doesn't really excel at any of these, I think it does everything well enough that it brings an immersive and interesting experience that you can very easily enjoy. But yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like and subscribe. Check out the list in the description to my Twitter if you want to follow me there, and to my Wattpad where I post my stories, because in addition to doing all these videos on my channel, I'm also a writer. And if you do enjoy my stories, or you simply enjoy my videos, you can head over to Patreon or Subscribestar and pledge your support over there. But if you don't want to do that, you can still help me out by liking this video, subscribing, and especially by sharing this video with somebody who you think might enjoy it. And I think that's pretty much it for this video, so hopefully I'm gonna see you in the next one. Bye!